The mother was tasked with raising her children independently after her husband died, which was difficult. While trying to fix their situation, the mother desperately needed a babysitter, which caused her to ask a homeless woman. Once she returned home, she saw something that stunned her, causing her to realize her mistake. Desperate mom asked homeless woman to babysit. She was stunned when she got home and saw this. Harper and her husband, Billy, finished unpacking everything in their new home, marking the moment they finally moved in completely. But instead of this being a joyful time, it turned into a time of mourning because Billy unexpectedly died. This meant that Harper would have to raise their children on her own. Being a single mom raising 2 children is hard, let alone in a new surrounding. Harper didn't know anyone and was far away from her family, but she was determined to give her kids the best upbringing possible. But she wasn't aware that everything would soon take a very unexpected turn. It took a few days for Harper to get her head straight, but eventually she thought she was managing everything well. The kids loved their new school, and although they missed their dad, they seemed to deal with it okay. Harper felt less stressed, but that quickly changed when the funeral home contacted her. The funeral home contacted her to notify her about her payment. If they didn't get payment today, the grave she reserved for Billy would be given to someone else. Harper's mind raced. She needed to go to the funeral home, but she didn't want to take the kids or leave them alone. What now? It was impossible to find a babysitter, so last minute. Would they be okay on their own? Harper mumbled to herself while looking out the window as a sign she was getting desperate. In no way would she leave the kids alone. Harper broke and started crying because she saw no other options until out of her kitchen window, Harper saw a woman she recognized. She had seen the woman walk through the neighborhood a couple of times and was now in the yard beside her. The neighbor, she exclaimed, rushing out the door. She approached the woman and asked if she would watch the children for a while. Harper noticed she overwhelmed the woman, so she assured her she should be gone for at most 30 minutes. The woman opened her mouth to react, but before she could say anything, Harper interrupted her. "Thank you so much," he yelled before opening her car door and driving away. "Let's get this over with." Harper mumbled. She entered the funeral home, determined to solve this problem. She offered to pay in installments, and eventually the funeral home agreed. When Harper left, she realized it had taken longer than anticipated, so she rushed home. She left the neighbor with the kids for too long. With a sigh, Harper opened the door. "I'm home," she shouted. Her voice echoed through the house. It took a moment for her to realize what was going on. It was silent. Ever since she got kids, the house was never quiet. What was going on? Were they pranking her? Come out wherever you are." Harp yelled with a slight smile. She was convinced the kids were just hiding from her, but her smile slowly faded when she moved from room to room and found no one. The temperature rose and she started to sweat as Harper realized her children were gone. Her whole body was shaking, which almost caused her to fall from the stairs when she went down to the living room. Maybe they were at the neighbor's house. Harper mumbled hopefully. She regained control over her body and went to the front door, but when she passed the kitchen, something caught her attention. On the kitchen table was a note with a message scribbled on it. Harper didn't know she could move so quickly as she dashed toward it and started to read. Her heart skipped a beat when her eyes read the first line. "Dear Miss, I'm not your neighbor, but a homeless woman." A homeless person, Harp exclaimed as tears started to form in her eyes. She left her kids alone with a homeless person, and now they're gone. She wiped away her tears and continued reading the message. "You will find your kids at the merry-go-round at the fair." Harper read the line a few times. The note caused Harper to be overwhelmed by worries. She was furious with herself. An unknown woman had taken her kids to the fair. "I gave my kids to a homeless woman?" she repeated while hammering her hands on the steering wheel. Harper hurried to the fair, not knowing what she would find. After finally finding a parking space, Harper could walk to the fair. No, she moved her head desperately, looking over the crowd, but it was like the whole city was here. The street was crowded with children and parents. Where was the merry-go-round? Would they really be there? That last thought made her even more worried. "Well, I won't find them just by standing here," Harper eventually said to herself. She started moving through the crowd, every now and then standing on her toes to look out over the group, looking for the merry-go-round. It seemed pointless as it was way too busy at the fair, but then she saw something. Between all the moving people, Harp saw a quick flash. Did she see it correctly? She nimbly maneuvered her way through the crowd and gasped eventually. She did see it correctly. The homeless woman stood by one of the attractions, which wasn't the merry-go-round. She was standing alone. Where were the kids? All the anger she felt to herself and the woman suddenly reached its boiling point. She started to run. "Are you crazy? What are you doing here? Where are my children?" Harper yelled at the woman when she was still quite far away. She was so furious she didn't care if she caused a scene. The homeless woman was startled when she heard Harper screaming and saw her approach. "Why didn't you tell me you were homeless?" Harper said when she stood beside her. The woman explained she couldn't react and that Harper interrupted her when she tried to tell her, but where were the kids? Harper's worst fears became true. When she asked that question, the homeless woman stared at her and didn't answer. "Where are my kids?" Harper demanded with a quiver in her voice. A mix of fury and worry rushed through her body. Then the homeless woman hesitantly shrugged. "I don't know." "What do you mean you don't know?" Harper shouted furiously. She couldn't believe this was happening. She breathed loudly as she looked around and listened to what the homeless woman had to say. The woman explained that the kids went to some attractions, after which she lost sight of them and hasn't seen them again. The moment Harper left the maze for the second time, she went in overdrive. She saw the homeless woman still standing alone at the exit. Where were her children? Her breathing became rapid, and she looked around desperately. Then all of a sudden, Harper started running over the fair, screaming her children's names. Her vision was blurry, and she kept bumping into people. "Jack, Melanie!" She screamed at the top of her lungs. When she felt a hand on her shoulder, she turned around hopeful, but it was the homeless woman. "We will find them," she said, not knowing where their search would lead them. It all became too much for Harper. The realization now fully kicked in. Her children were gone. She fell down and started sobbing. Her screaming and sobbing attracted a lot of attention, and the homeless woman tried to urge people away, but while doing so, something they couldn't have expected happened. Harper somewhat calmed down, and most people resumed their journey, but one woman kept looking at her. "Are you looking for a boy and a girl?" The woman suddenly asked Harper, who looked up immediately. When she nodded, the woman told her she might be able to help. Then she said something unbelievable. The person explained she saw a boy and a girl walking with a man, which she thought was weird because she remembered seeing the children with a woman earlier who was now nowhere to be seen. "A man took my children," Harper repeated softly. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. Her mind raced. This couldn't be happening. What did she do to deserve this? For the third time that day, her vision became blurry due to the tears in her eyes. It was all too much for her. How would she be able to get her children back, not knowing it would soon become clear? Now, the women knew the children weren't at the fair, but with a man, their hope vanished. The homeless woman tried her best to help Harper process this news and decide what to do next. But before they could come up with something, Harper's cell phone rang. It was an unknown number. Harper stared at her phone. "You should pick up," the homeless woman said. Harper looked at her and hesitantly picked up, but before she could speak, her breath halted in her throat. A deep voice said precisely what she was afraid of. "I have the kids. Meet me alone at the Crystal Hotel, room 304. The homeless woman saw how Harper turned pale. "What is it?" And she asked, and when Harper told her what the voice on the phone said, they stared at each other in silence. Harper hit her fist on the concrete below her. What could she do? Her children were in incredible danger. While Harper thought about the best way to go to the Crystal Hotel, the homeless woman talked to her. She didn't fully register what she said, but it ended with police. "No police," Harper snapped, explaining the person on the phone said she needed to come alone, and there was something else. Harper couldn't explain why she was feeling it, but for some reason she thought she could trust the voice on the phone. Was it the way that the person spoke? Was there something familiar Harper couldn't tell, and she knew it didn't make sense, so she did take some precautions before going? The person on the phone told Harper to come alone, but no one would expect a homeless woman to be with her. So Harper asked the woman to come with her and call the police if she was gone for too long. It was the perfect plan, or so she thought. Despite the shiny name, the Crystal Hotel was everything except shiny. The rundown building was filthy and ominous. The homeless woman stayed outside while Harper entered. She made her way to the elevator, which to her surprise still functioned, and pressed the button to the third floor, not knowing what was waiting for her there. The elevator played relaxing music, but Harper was everything but relaxed. Her hands felt clammy, and her heart bonked in her chest. "It will be all right, it will be all right," she muttered with her eyes closed. She was startled by the sudden ding of the elevator, signaling the arrival on the third floor. The elevator door opened before her, but Harper didn't move. It was as if it all became real the moment she stepped outside. Should she just go down again and call the police anyway? She shook the thought out of her head. "You've come this far," she mumbled while leaving the elevator. Harper approached the room and mustered the courage to knock on the door. She heard some stumbling on the other side. like multiple feet running to the door. Her mouth fell open in surprise when she saw her children open the door. But when Harper looked behind them, she got the shock of her life. She broke free from her children's embrace and ran into the room. What is going on? She cried while embracing the man in the room. There was a long silence as the couple held their embrace. Harper eventually took a step back. She was looking at her husband, alive and well. What was going on? You died. What is going on? Harper exclaimed. She didn't understand anything anymore. Instead of her children being kidnapped, she found them safe with her thought to be dead husband. I want an explanation right now, she said. Billy stepped forward hesitantly and started saying how sorry he was and that he would tell her everything. Billy gestured to Harper to take a seat and gave the children his phone so they wouldn't interrupt their talk. It wasn't supposed to go like this. He started. Billy continued to tell her that he went undercover from the moment they moved here, which caused Harper to become furious. Harper raised her voice when she asked him why she knew nothing about it. Usually, the family would be notified when an agent went undercover and not let them die without saying anything. She screamed. Billy understood her madness and agreed with her, but told her she would have known eventually. It needed to look real. Otherwise, you would all be in danger, Billy said, and he continued to explain that when it was safe to include the whole family in the operation, they would be brought up to speed. This moment was coming closer and closer, but then something unexpected happened. His undercover operation led him back to the city, so he needed to be careful not to blow his cover and run into his family. A lead brought me to the fair where I saw something wrong. I saw our children walking with some homeless woman and had to intervene, he said. Harper listened speechlessly to how her husband explained everything. She still hadn't fully processed he was still alive and just stared at him. I took the kids to my safe house and found a way to contact you, Billy continued uninterrupted. The next thing he said caused Harper to come back to reality. I just hoped you would come alone, he said. This sentence echoed inside Harper's head. The homeless woman, if she didn't hear anything soon, she would call the police. In a split-second decision, Harper jumped up and ran out of the room, not knowing this would lead to more problems. Harper stood in the elevator and noticed her husband followed her. What are you doing? He shouted, but the doors closed before he could join her inside. What was she going to say to the homeless woman? How would she explain this situation? But what mattered most was that she didn't call the police. Moments later, she was outside and looked for the homeless woman. When she saw her, she ran toward her. It's okay, I found my children, she exclaimed. The homeless woman was happy for her, but asked what happened exactly. Harper was afraid of this question, but before she could answer, something happened. Billy suddenly joined their conversation and asked what was going on. Harper gasped, realizing her husband's cover was in danger. She explained this, but to her surprise, Billy reacted calmly. I knew the risk I took, Billy eventually said. Harper didn't know what he meant, so he explained that he had to forfeit this operation. At first, Harper thought this was really bad, but she soon realized this was the best thing that could have happened. Shortly after his cover was blown, Billy returned home, and the family moved back to where they originally came from. The family returned to their previous life and lived happily together.